Hi, this is Shadi. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Today it's going to be about the execution / torture methods of the Ainu people in order to either punish murderers and criminals, or to draw out a confession, or to prove guilt or no. The book will be in the description below to find out all about them. Briefly speaking, they're the indigenous people of the northern part of Japan, Hokkaido, the island of Hokkaido. Today they reside between Japan and some of them in Russia. So today we will look at their, like I said, execution and torture methods. The first one is the worst one in my opinion. For murder, it is customary to cut the tendons of the feet in two, thus maiming a person for the remainder of his life. The tendons were severed close to the heels, so the Achilles tendons basically. This was a terrible punishment, for a person thus treated could not possibly do any work or hunting. He was ever dependent on his relatives for the necessaries of life. I have seen an old man who had been so punished he was unable to walk and was obliged to move himself along upon his hands, in which he held two small blocks of wood. This sounds very cruel and also very painful, and also keep in mind, lack of medicine, surgeries, etc. This was probably the most painful thing, and also remaining in this way for the rest of your life. Also, there's another thing: not all of them, or the murderers I should say, had this particular sentence to them. A lot of them, they were sent to what was called, where the earth has no trees or birds. It was described as cold and dreary. It is theorized that it is probably Siberia. So not all of them had this particular punishment. Exile was another tool that they would have. So if you read the book, you would see a lot of things that is just I would say interesting, from mysticism, really small cultural aspects, marriage, divorce. A lot of the stuff, particularly to draw out a confession, was actually very weird and almost to the point of impossible. They were just mainly putting you to be guilty. So the next one was the hot water ordeal. So you had many, and this is not just one. So here, this one, where you would be put in a huge pot, and this pot would be boiling until you basically draw out a confession. This one is the same tool that they would use to actually boil the fish and draw out the oil from the fish. They would use it in order to do this. Now, this wasn't very popular. They had other smaller punishments in order to draw out a confession. For example, a small hot pan with boiling water in it. The guilt would show: you either immediately confess before you had your hand put in it, or, and this is extremely, I would say, bizarre and just absurd in my opinion, you would put your hand in it. If your hand is scalded, then you are guilty. If your hand comes out uninjured, then you are not guilty. Again, mysticism and a lot of old beliefs you can find in this book, but I would say this is just done in order to prove guilt, no other else, because I'm sure no one miraculously had their hand come out uninjured from boiling water. So this one is a great one. There's also another one where they would either use hot steel or hot stone, and they would be pressed on the skin in order to, again, you either pressure them into confessing, or if they come out uninjured, then they are not guilty. There was a punishment for the women where they would smoke tobacco. Also, it's all written. You can check the link in the description, but there's no photos. They would smoke tobaccos, make with the hot tobacco or the ashes, they would put it in the water, and then they would drink it. And if nothing happens to them, like discomfort, etc., then they're not guilty. But if something else, if they start to cough or throw up, etc., then they're guilty. Another one is to drink a cup of water and then toss it back. If it lands upright, if I'm not mistaken, then you're not guilty. There's also another punishment just like this one, but without the boiling water. You have to put your mouth the entire time, just like that man is sitting, and then you have to drink the entire like pot of water that you are in, and thus you're not guilty. And your lips should always be in the water. You cannot just have a drink, relax, and then keep drinking. You should be constantly drinking. So obviously this is very much impossible. Or you breathe from your nose, and then you just put your lips in the water, and then you can have a break, but continue to drink. Again, it's really a hardcore, cruel, inhumane stuff, I would say. This one, the stake ordeal, this was also to draw out a confession. You had 2 stakes buried into the ground, and then you would have your both legs stretched, where you would feel it in the adductors, of course the groin, and also the same with the hands. If you have very stiff shoulders, you can easily feel it until you basically confess. So this is very similar to the torture racks, where they would like just stretch you slowly until like the medieval execution styles, but this one here is from the Far East. So again, this is very cruel torture methods in order to draw out confessions. So, and the final one is the stake tied to the hair ordeal, and this is where you are hanging by your head. So the torture is, you would have your hair tied to the stake, and the stake is horizontal. It is done in a way where your toes are lightly grazing the ground, or just close enough to touch the ground, as you see here in front of you. Obviously, with long hair, you would know that this will pull greatly on your scalp, and it would hurt a lot, and also it would put a lot of pressure on your neck. So if you are remaining comfortable and not feeling anything, then you are, I would say, innocent. But if you are guilty and you're in so much pain and screaming, then this is obviously either you confess or it shows that you are guilty. Very similar to the punishments mentioned previously. So you can see that this is greatly inhumane. This would not go by today's standards of investigations and pulling out a confession. But again, this video is different. I'm sure many of you are not even familiar with the Ainu people. I know I talk a lot about arresting techniques, etc. So I figured this is a little bit close, not so much jiu-jitsu related, but this is a very interesting topic, at least to me. So if you have anything else to add, please let me know down below. Also consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive content. I post there once a week, and please do not forget to check out Josh Simon's shop in the description below. This was Shadi, and thank you for listening.